share a talk on the theme of our dreams belong here. Our dreams belong here, and I am talking about the world that is possible. I'm talking about how we can embrace our potential and our roles as creators of this world that is possible. And I want to ground in this affirmation that there is a basic goodness to life that we know and experience when we become present to our breath, for example, or to something so simple as drinking water, or being in nature, or connecting with another person. We know this basic goodness. And there is a basic goodness within us as well that is natural and inherent to who we are. We carry within us a sense of fairness, truth, compassion, and creativity. And I see this in the work of a child, for example, who can sit down with some very simple things like crayons and paper and just create something beautiful, something that speaks of the joy that's in our hearts. And it's something otherworldly, and yet it's totally a part of this world. Talking about this divine creativity that we have, that's so evident from the moment we come into this world. And yet we live in a socially constructed world, a society that is in so many ways offensive to our spirits. Just days ago, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And almost immediately, women in 23 states are losing their freedom to make essential reproductive choices. And what makes it even more disturbing is that while this decision is so hurtful and terrifying to so many people, especially for women and all who can give birth, on the other hand, people are taking this callous and sadistic delight in the same decision. And to me, that makes it much more painful. I believe we see this same sadistic tendency in our horrific wars, in the racism, in the daily brutality of extreme poverty and economic inequality. So we get to see on a large scale how we as people act when our hearts and minds are distorted by greed and hatred and delusion. And we live in this world. And it is difficult to live in this world. And yet today I want to, despite how much is wrong, I want to explore how we can take hold of the courage to hope and dream, and how we can embrace our potential, despite the way things are, to create heaven on earth, audacious, to take our ideals and use them as a pattern to refashion our world, to create something beautiful. Because it's my hope and it's my belief that this repatterning of our world would not only create a more compassionate and just society, it would also bring our society into harmony with the intrinsic goodness of nature. So it would be creating a life-sustaining society as well. And yet we face a basic resistance to even taking up this project, this kind of hopeful action. We face a very basic resistance because to do this, we'll have to take down the protection of our egos that keep us safe from even knowing about how out of kilter our society really is. Day by day, just as our egos kind of protect us from getting hit by a car in the street or, dying in some other way or forgetting to eat, but they also keep our minds protected. They don't want us to move into the traffic of the bad news. They don't want us to be taking in this difficult information because it throws us off balance. And so our egos become very protective, but they, at the same time, diminish our potential. They don't allow our light to come out. It's protective, but it's overprotective. But then when we see something like the overturning of Roe v. Wade, when we see the war in Ukraine break out for no apparent reason, when we see police brutality, like when George Floyd was literally, his breath was taken away before our eyes, or we see wildfires of an enormous scale, just causing incredible destruction. These kinds of events pierce through the walls of our egos. These are the defenses that we've built up to protect our humanity from the ravages and the dysfunctions of our dominant society so that we can live day to day without being so destabilized. And yet, it really is a blessing to have those walls pierced open. The bubble is pierced, and then just for a little while, we see how off our world is. We allow this painful information in, and then it inspires us. We feel inspired to act, and we instinctively want to join with others who feel the same way. And we come together with this longing to create a better world. And anytime I've been out in a protest or at a vigil, it's that instinct that comes, and we can feel the power in the prayers that we make. We can feel the power in the words and the clarity of vision for the world we want to create, because just in that moment, we have been pierced open. And that light within ourselves is beginning to get out. We're coming together, and we could see the enormous potential and the power that we have. But then so soon after, the walls are rebuilt. Our connections kind of falter. We met out in a field somewhere, to protest, but are we staying connected? And then we shift back into the shadows of what exists, and we shift back into the normal, and we forget. And we go back to the comfort zone. We go back to the mediocrity of how we live. And we let our power fade. And so I want to ask a couple of bigger questions like, what is spirituality? What is faith? For me, these are the practices and the stories that allow us to open the gates of our consciousness. These are the practices and the stories that enable us to sit with the creative tension between the world as it is and the world as it should be, as it could be, and as it will be. Spirituality is how we construct a world that unites the elemental goodness of nature with the elemental goodness of who we are. And I believe that spirituality is a way of relating with our egos, which is a beautiful and ancient part of us, of our being that developed long before we had language or consciousness as we know it today. And as I said earlier, our egos guard our humanity, just like they guard our bodies. But our humanity is not so fragile that it needs to be sheltered from reality. Our humanity is more powerful than our egos understand. And I believe that when we expose our humanity to the light of reality, we give a chance to grow our humanity into our divinity. And then we discover within ourselves a source of light without which our world is lost in darkness. That's a light that we carry within ourselves. And a community like ours, a community of spiritual practice, is about opening the gates of our hearts and minds, not only to let in the difficult, but to let out the good, to let the light out in a sustained fashion, in a way that is transformative, where the tension, where we have the support to stay in the tension, how it is and how it should be, and find our mode of action that's bringing our light into the world. And I want to say that I believe and I know in my heart that the world we live in does not need to be so hard. Doesn't need to be so cruel and divided and full of self-inflicted misery. The world does not need to be so bleak that we have to resort to a spirituality of coping, which I feel people have been doing for hundreds of years. A spirituality of just hoping we'll reach a better world when we die. Giving up on this world and hoping that when we die, we'll reach a better place. But for me, that's a spirituality of apathy. That's a spirituality of surrendering our power and not even giving ourselves a chance to make an impact and heal this world. But I want to affirm that the power that we have within ourselves is so much greater than we understand. Our egos are trying to protect us from the world around us, yet they are not, in doing that, there's a barrier that's not allowing our power to come out and heal the world around us. And the power within us is greater than the obstacles in this world. It's greater than the dysfunctions. It's greater than the greed and the hatred and the racism, because truth is greater than that falsehood, and love is stronger than that hate. And we have a tremendous power, and our ego is working it backwards, trying to keep us safe, but it's keeping our world so dangerous, because our world is not safe without the power of our humanity being expressed consistently in a connected way, in an engaged way. That's the only safe and beautiful world we'll ever have, is when we are engaged with that light. So today, my prayer is for a greater courage to dream for myself and others, that we might imagine the world as it should be and hang with the tension and sustain the vision. And I'm praying to find renewed strength and energy and faith to overcome the barriers that our society puts in the way of those sacred dreams. And I want to end by affirming that the dreams of our hearts belong to this world. They are meant to be here, just as we are meant to be here in all of our fullness. Amen.